thought it was just installed.
You gotta go to YouTube.
I was right on domestic options. I was right on options.
Yeah, but
It didn't open.
it hasn't started yet.
No, but it was supposed to.
Yeah, it's supposed to. They're delaying it still.
Oh, here it is. I'll see it.
Good evening. Thank you for waiting while our friends got to park their cars. My name's Jennifer Hecker. I'm the Executive Director of Options Domestic and Sexual Violence Services, and it is my genuine honor to be here with you this evening. We would like to open with a prayer with Father Andy Hammocky.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the hope of Easter. Your Son rising prevented evil from getting the last word. Jesus' death and resurrection taught us that you can make good out of anything, even our worst moments. Christ, like the many you healed in the Gospels, bring healing to those who are in need of your healing here tonight. Send your Spirit down upon Stacy and our speakers. Guide their words and open our ears to hear what you want us to hear. May we leave here tonight with renewed hope in you. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
This evening, we are gathered here because of courage. The courage of a survivor who chose to speak. The courage of investigators and prosecutors who refused to give up. And the courage of every single one of you in this room right now. Because walking through those doors was hard, and doing hard things is its own kind of brave. Tonight, our program is called Surviving the I-70 Rapist, a story of strength and healing. And I want you to hold on to those two words, strength and healing. Because what you're going to hear tonight, what happens this evening, that is what this is all about. It's not just about what happened, but what came after. It's not just about the darkness, but the light. It is about the way people, one person in particular, who found their way through the darkness. What you're going to witness tonight is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, power of community, and the power of you, individuals who refuse to look away when something happens. We are honored that you are here with us this evening. We brought this event to you this night through the Ellis County Sexual Assault Response Team, and we have several members here tonight if you'd like to stand up so we can put a few faces to names. Thank you. We are also supported this evening through the Center for Empowering Victims of Gender-Based Violence right here at Fort Hays State University. Can you guys stand up so if anyone wants to make a connection? Oh, they might all be outside at their table. There's a table outside. These two organizations are doing very vital work in our community to make sure that the system in place is a system that works, is a system that is responsive to survivors, and a system that makes everyone in our community more safe. Options, Domestic and Sexual Violence Services, is this community's domestic and sexual violence service program serving victims and survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, dating violence, and much more. We have been providing advocacy since 1983 and are the only domestic and sexual violence program serving all of Northwest Kansas. We provide confidential advocacy, counseling, crisis intervention, emergency housing, rental assistance, and support services. And all of that work is made possible not just by our team of advocates, but people just like you. People who care enough to show up and learn more, people who care enough to show up and bear witness to something that someone that we love happened to. If you or someone you know is struggling with domestic or sexual violence, Options is here for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We exist to serve you. We exist to serve your loved ones. We exist to serve the community at large. Before we go any further, I want to make sure that we take a moment and give a little bit of a content warning and to let you know that there is support available for you tonight. This program includes discussions of sexual violence and the details of a criminal case. The content may be emotionally difficult, and there is absolutely no wrong way for you to take care of yourself. If you need to step out at any point, please do so. If you need someone to talk to, we have trained victim advocates here with us tonight. Some of them have a little compass sticker. Those of, can our advocates stand up? There's a couple right there. And then we have some advocates outside at our table, so please feel free to step outside as well. Please make sure that you take care of yourself. Look for somebody with a sticker. They'll contact you, you can contact them right away. We are glad you are here tonight. Let's begin. I think I need to step back. I hear some feedback. To understand the full scope of what you're going to hear tonight, we need to understand the case, the investigation, the pursuit of justice, and what it took to get here. I am privileged to introduce to you two of the men who will walk us through that history. Mark Bennett, give a wave please, Mark. Thank you. Is the Sedgwick County District Attorney. Before his election to that role, Mark spent 15 years as the Deputy DA supervising the prosecution of sex crimes, human trafficking, domestic violence, and elder abuse. He is a Kansas State and Washburn Law graduate and former president of the Kansas County and District Attorneys Association, and he was named Legal Prosecutor of the Year in 2018. He has presented on many of these issues before the Kansas legislature, the FBI, national conferences all across the United States, and we are grateful for your presence and your pursuit of justice on behalf of survivors. Thank you, Mark. Joining us on Zoom is Mark Kendrick. Give us a wave there, Mark. A retired senior special agent and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, where he served for 35 years, and he brought to that work an additional 11 years of law enforcement experience and a law degree from Washburn University. Mark was central to the investigation that ultimately brought the case to resolution. Mark, thank you for your tenacity and for being here tonight. Please welcome Mark and Mark. Okay.
Well, good evening. I was asked to give a recitation of some of the facts of the case and how this came to fruition. So I'm going to back up a little bit. You heard him say that I'm from Wichita, Sedgwick County DA. I was not the DA when I first became aware of this case. I was an assistant deputy at the time, and I was eating food in a Mexican restaurant when we got a page in 2002. I was with a friend of mine, worked in the office, and back in those days we had pagers. We went to a payphone. For those of you who weren't born at the time, they were the phones on walls you could put coins into. Anyway, we called and said, what are we supposed to do, what's going on? And that's when my involvement in this case began. June 25th of 2002, crime scene investigators in Wichita found, and this is where it starts to get unpleasant, so bear with me. I apologize, this is not an easy ride. We found the nude, decapitated body of Lucille Gallegos in an apartment 905 in an apartment complex in roughly, if you know, Wichita Central and Ridge. I remember getting the call, walking in, getting suited up, walking the aisle that they had cleared a path. You know, had the booties on my feet and lunch lady hat on, everything, spacesuit, and walked in, was led to her body, and she laid right there, decapitated, nude, and we knew we had obviously a remarkable crime scene to deal with. Over the course of the next 12 to 15 hours, every crime scene investigator in the city was working the case. An autopsy was conducted the next day. It found the cause of death to be multiple sharp force injuries. The coroner found all sorts of injuries, including stab wounds, etc. But what was remarkable is that her genitalia had been stabbed somewhere on the order of 60 or 70 times. There was no seminal fluid present, but this did look, she's nude, she's been stabbed in her genitalia. There was a sexual component to this that was obvious. Over the course of the next several days, DNA testing was conducted. It does not happen like it does on TV. This is not something that was going to be resolved in a matter of minutes or hours. It took days, took weeks, and we ultimately found a splotch of blood on the exterior of this apartment. I should clarify, this is an apartment that was completely empty. Lucille was she cleaned apartments for the apartment complex, thousands of apartments within this larger complex. She had a wildly abusive boyfriend who was a wretched human being who beat her mercilessly all the time, but he was not the man who ultimately killed her. It was a guy he'd been in prison with that we found out had done the crime. We didn't know that night. So the DNA comes back not to Chris, the boyfriend, but to Doug, Chris's friend from prison, which didn't make any sense. He was charged with being involved with her homicide, but we continued to try to piece this together. How did this guy, who's from McPherson, by the way, end up in Wichita and commit this grisly crime? We got our answer shortly thereafter when a database called CODIS, C-O-D-I-S, which is the Combined Indexing System for DNA in the United States, came back, and they told us that Mr. Belt was his name. I'll try not to say it too many times tonight. He was what I had known when I was in college as the I-70 rapist, a man responsible for rapes occurring from Colby to Salina, Grandview Plaza, and if you're not familiar with that, that's the little small town on the other side of the river from Junction City, just east, just before you get to Fort Riley. McPherson, Hutch, I think I said Salina, and then also Southern Illinois. There was at least 2, if not 3 victims on basically just next to a truck stop in St. Louis, and on the other side of the state line in Southern Illinois, there were victims there, all dated back or all tied back to the same man. That changed the equation. Now that we knew we had a serial rapist, I think the number was 14 is what's always stuck in my head. Mark may be able to tell us different if I'm wrong, but I think it was 14 victims we knew about that could be tied together by DNA. And once I was given that information, that's when I met Mark and I met other KBI agents and I met the chief of police in Colby and McPherson and Hutch and et cetera. And I began to go through all of those cases, and I tried to meet at least with all the victims in those cases and asked them would they come to Wichita and testify in what was now a capital murder case to help us seek the death penalty against the man who had killed Lucille and had raped all of these victims. That's when I met Stacy. I drove up to Hayes and met her and talked to her and asked her if she would consider coming to Wichita to testify in our case. Once she said, I got the nod of approval from her, said she would do it. I believe it was 5 other women of the 14 said they would. And then I sought the permission from the judge in Sedgwick County to allow me, because I don't have jurisdiction over what happened in Colby or in Salina or in McPherson, but I do over Wichita. And so I was asking permission from a judge to explain to a jury in Sedgwick County why his rapes that he had committed were relevant in my capital murder case. It explained why he might have done violence, sexual violence, but not been able and not left seminal fluid. And the judge, we actually deposed, I don't know if you'll remember that, we actually deposed the women. I didn't want to do it in an open courtroom and force them to be subjected to the public inquiry, number one, and number two, if the judge wouldn't let me, then I've just unnecessarily traumatized them again. So we did depositions, we submitted those, they were videotaped, submitted those to the judge, and she agreed that it was admissible evidence. And so we tried the case in 2004. 6 women from around the state of Kansas came to Wichita and testified in his capital murder case. The jury found him guilty of capital murder, and then at what's called a second stage of those proceedings found that the weighing process that is mandated by the Supreme Court of the United States told them that he was deserving of the death penalty, and he was sentenced to die in prison by a lethal injection. A few years ago, he died before that took place in custody, died in custody. Lucille, back in Wichita, when she was decapitated, one of the more grisly aspects of that case was that her head was not in the apartment. And as I stand here today, her head has never been found. So as he was dying and I was notified by the Department of Corrections that he was going to die, I reached out and asked police, try to go over and talk to him. I couldn't because he was still technically on appeal and I could not have contact with a represented person without violating my own ethics. And my license was worth more to me than be fast and loose with it like that. So the police made an effort, reached out to him, and I can't repeat to you what he said, but basically, F the police, F Bennett, and he wouldn't talk to us. So he went to his grave, keeping a secret with him. So I have said a few times, I hope, I'm not sure there's a heaven. I hope there is, but I really hope there's a hell. Maybe that's not a very nice thing to say, but I'm unapologetic. Last thing I'll say is that when I went back through this to set this up for Stacy, I didn't list every single case that I knew of, but I went back and found my old pleadings from 22 years ago, 24 years ago when we found out, and I got the judge's permission, and I can tell you that the first case that I know of was March 26th of '89, a 28-year-old female. The second one was September 25th of '89 in McPherson, although he's in McPherson, his hometown, 30-year-old female. June 14th of 1990, 25-year-old female in McPherson. March 7th of '91, a 21-year-old female in McPherson. The fifth one that I'm aware of, and again, Mark, if there's something you can remember off the top of your head, pipe up, speak up, but March 4th, night of March 3rd into the morning of March 4th, 1993, in Thomas County, Stacy's case.
That's
Sixth,
true.
say again, Mark? Is that right?
So that's true.
Okay. August 27th of '93, Saline County, a 61-year-old female. She was about 4'11", and when she came to Wichita and testified, she was born on the island of Malta, and she married a soldier after, I guess it would have been Korea, something like that, and I'll never forget her testimony. October 4th, so 38 days later, the 61-year-old woman from Malta was in a threeplex in Salina. On one end, she was raped. 38 days later, he came back to the woman on the other end of the triplex and raped her. It was the one time when he, from what I could tell, was the most physically violent. He beat her senseless and by the time, blacked her eyes and really beat her up, but he didn't realize that she was deaf. And she could not understand what he was telling her to do. And so she didn't respond as he directed her to move and do certain things. So he kind of went crazy and really beat her senseless. But she finally spoke, and he could hear in her voice that she was deaf, and so he finally quit. August 17th in '94, there was a 45-year-old woman in town in Reno County in Hutch for the birth of her grandchild, and she was staying at her daughter's home when it happened. Again, Grandview Plaza, there were others. Briefly, I want to go easy on this. This is hard enough for Stacy. I'm impressed beyond measure that she's here tonight, so I'll just make this so she didn't have to. On the evening of March 3rd into the early morning hours of March 4th, Stacy was home She was a student at Colby Community College. She was not feeling well, had taken some NyQuil. She woke to a hand holding a knife at her, or holding a hand over her mouth, holding a knife. She was 19 at the time. He was wearing dark-colored leather gloves, which smelled of fuel, and he used duct tape around her face, around her eyes, and then duct taped her hands behind her back, and then proceeded to sexually assault her multiple times. At one point, her alarm went off around 3 a.m., so we know he was there before that. One of the things that I thought was particularly telling as to this man, not as if all of this isn't bad enough, he drank 4 of her wine coolers that she had in her fridge. He ate a can of chicken soup cold that he opened up with a Campbell's can. Who takes the time to do that during the course of a sexual assault? I mean, he was a pro. Did a number of other things that really don't bear repeating here. I will say this, each woman described literally the same ritualistic things he would do, from the pattern that he would cut their shirts off with, the tape around the face, certain acts. I mean, it was literally kind of a checkbox. He would just do the same thing to each woman, which was also very telling. DNA, this was almost a case where you could have told me, I could have told you who the rapist was without DNA, but just by comparing how similar his rituals were. DNA came back, just to give you a sense of how strong the case was. The DNA from the profiles generated by the KBI, in the Caucasian population, it's called a random match probability. For those of you who are studying forensic science, you'll know what I mean, but basically it means that the odds of finding someone else at random in the Caucasian population that had the same DNA pattern as him was 1 in 1 trillion. There's not a trillion people on the planet, folks. And that was from the vaginal swabs, and then there was also swabs taken from Stacy's sweatpants that contained a droplet of seminal fluid. That came back on the Caucasian population, 1 in 55 quadrillion. I don't think there's been quadrillion people that ever walked the earth from the birth of man till today. So it's a scientific way of saying it's the guy. So those are the facts. And again, I don't want to overdo this. I don't want to set Stacy up. I want her to be able to get up here. I don't want her to have to go through all that again. I will tell you, when she came to Wichita, each successive person who testified, each woman who testified, was profoundly impressive. They were all strong. They were all empowered. But every one of them had to walk past him in that courtroom and sit down and answer questions from me. I've always said, I've been an attorney now for my 31st year as a prosecutor in the state. I don't know how many, I can't even begin to tell you how many people I've had on the stand, thousands of witnesses, 160 or 70 or 80 felony jury trials, murders, rapes, you name it. Best witness I ever saw in my life, Stacy.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now it's time to hear the heart of tonight's story. I'd like to invite Annalise to come up and introduce our survivor speaker.
Stacy Edgett-Minson was born and raised in Norton, Kansas as the only child of Elvin and Pam Edgett. Stacy graduated from Norton Community High School and headed to Colby Community College, where she obtained her associate's in science degree in the spring of 1993. In May of 1995, Stacy successfully earned her bachelor's in animal sciences and industry from Kansas State University. Stacy worked for a year at Servitech Incorporated in Dodge City, Kansas, before accepting a job as a K-State Research and Extension Agricultural Agent in Waukene and Trego County. She served in this capacity, focusing efforts on agricultural, including livestock and crops, community development, and 4-H. Since 2003, Stacy has been a watershed specialist with K-State, working to engage farmers, ranchers, landowners, citizens, businesses, and city and county governments in water quality protection of efforts to protect and/or improve water resources in the Big Creek Middle Smoky Hill River watersheds. She has a keen ability to work with a diverse audience and build partnerships, trust and relationships with individuals, organizations, and other local and government agencies. Stacy is most proud of her role as a mom. She has 2 adult sons, Carter and his wife Bailey, and Cooper. She has enjoyed supporting them over the years and watching them grow into fine young adults. Anyone that knows Stacy can promise you she cherishes time spent with her children as well as time with family and friends. Many of those friends being chosen as family, as evidenced by the large group sitting in the front row here tonight and those supporting her online. Community is an important part of Stacy's life as well. She has been involved in many organizations over the years, including the Waukene Chamber of Commerce, Trego County Hospital Auxiliary, and Gamma Eta. Stacy is a lifetime member of the Waukene FFA Alumni, the National FFA Alumni Associations, and the Waukene VFW and its Post Auxiliary. She has served on the Corrections and Northwest Kansas Juvenile Services Boards for more than 15 years, including serving as chairman for several years. Stacy is a member of the Christ the King Catholic Church, where she taught religious education for years, is a member of the Altar Society and former officer, and currently serves as a lector and Eucharistic minister. Her faith has always been an important part of her life, in good times and bad times, and even in her darkest moments, especially in the late hours of March 3rd, 1993. Stacy knew he was with her and has been with her ever since. Stacy's dedication to her family, her faith, and her community has shaped not only her life, but the lives of many across Northwest Kansas. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Stacy Edgettmanson.
Are we ready? Okay. If some of you know me well enough, you know I'm not going to stand in one place or sit. The other thing, you know that I'm stubborn enough that he was not going to take my life. So, how we got to tonight, in December of 24, I was going through my files, getting my taxes ready, and I found the deposition that, and I'm going to call them Bennett and Kendrick so you know which Mark I'm talking about, okay? I found that deposition. Didn't know it was there, didn't realize it had been put there. So that was into December. That year in 2025, Fort Hays State, they always do a back-to-school picnic in the fall. Well, they decided to add a back-to-school event in January. So myself and a friend, Holly, that works for the city, we worked together. We had a booth. And so as you walked around the black and gold room, there were all these stations. And there was a lady standing over here, and I kept thinking I needed to go there. And I couldn't figure out why. She didn't have anything. It was a black tablecloth. She had nothing there that told you why she was there. So this event was a couple hours. People would walk by her. She'd have 1 or 2 people. Holly had taken the round. She'd looked at things, and she said, well, you go. So I went, and it was like I was being pulled there. So I walked up to her, and I said, I feel like I'm supposed to come talk to you. And she goes, okay. And I said, I need you to tell me what you do. And she said, well, I'm a SANE nurse at Hays Medical Center. I'm in charge of SANE. And so I didn't know what SANE was. So she explained it, that if you're assaulted, there's a team of doctors, nurses, staff at Hays Medical Center that will basically be an advocate for you through the process. And I said, I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to talk to you. And I asked if she'd heard of the I-70 rapist, and she said yes. And I said, I'm the Colby victim. The hair stood up on her arms, and she said, yeah, you're supposed to be here. So a couple weeks later, she called and she asked if I would come talk to the SANE team at Hayes Medical Center. So the evening of March 3rd, the morning of March 4th of this year was 33 years. So last year it would have been almost 32 years. I have not given a presentation. I have not, after the press releases hit, there were people asking friends, how come I didn't know this? Did you know this? Well, how come I didn't know this? And it's just not something you bring up in random conversation with people. So I had some very good friends come talk to me, or come with me that day. Tricia Haskell, who was the SANE nurse, director of that, asked that I had people with me. So there were, 10, 12 people in the room. It was a very limited group. I gave that presentation, and then the team asked if I would come talk to the Ellis County Sexual Assault Response Team, or SART. And I said, sure. What does that entail? And they're like, just tell what you did today. So Aaron Larson, Hayes PD detective, he takes us down to the basement in the law enforcement center to this, and he has no idea what he's doing, why he's taking me and some friends. And I'm walking down in a basement not really knowing who this guy is and what I'm doing either. So he gets there, and then we find out after the fact that a lot of the SART members didn't realize we were coming, that I was sharing my story, and they asked if I would bring Bennett, because Kendrick decided he was going to retire and move to Florida. So I called Mark and asked actually I didn't call, I sent him a text message on Messenger. Haven't really had much contact with Mark over the years, a couple messages here and there, nothing consistent. So he said, yeah, when is it? I'll clear my calendar. Well, Aaron Cunningham, the county attorney, wanted to know how I made that happen, because he wanted to have that connection with him. So I wouldn't recommend doing what I did to get that connection, okay? So I spoke to that group, and that was 10 or 12 as well. So as the Holy Spirit has moved, this is how it is. The committee wanted to do something, and so they decided after I talked then that they wanted me to talk to you. So that's why we're here. And my son Carter and his wife now, they're in Pennsylvania where they live, and they're watching. And he asked me about a week and a half ago if I had a speech ready, if it was written, and I said I'm not going to write a speech. And he said, you're going to talk to all those people and wing it? And I said, well, yeah, but I lived it. And he said, okay, fair enough. So Cooper is here. Both of my boys know that it happened. They don't know a lot. So I guess we're going to roll and see if I lose my shit. They promised that they would protect me, okay? They've got me here today, and I don't think that, I think God brought us here. Today's scripture that I sent, it was spot on. This happening the day after Easter, it is showing you that God can bring the light. So hopefully, for some of you, all of you, I have people that lived with me after that who took a lot of the brunt, and I have a story that I didn't know till years later, a couple years ago. I graduated from Colby, I went to Manhattan, and I called a good friend, Dean, in the middle of the night and said, I need you to come over here. Amy's not here, and I'm struggling. So he left his girlfriend and came to my house in the middle of the night to take care of me. And I didn't find this out till about 3 years ago. And I'm like, oh, and you still talk to me? So I've always had people protecting me or surrounded me. I'm very blessed with that. So Options has shared some things. If you follow their Facebook page, it's not what you wear, it's not what you do. Shit just happens to good people, okay? And Colleen asked if I was going to cuss, and I said I didn't know if I was or not, and she told me I could, so if you don't like it, it's Colleen's fault. So I went home. I'd worked that night. I went home. I went to bed Bennett said I had a cold, so I'd taken some NyQuil. I had a test the next morning, so I set an alarm in the middle of the night so that that NyQuil didn't prevent me from waking up because I couldn't miss this test. The apartment complex in Colby, I got to get my bearings straight, were like this. There was a window here, and there was a door here. This was my bedroom, and the window followed to a hallway. My bed was on the south wall. I fell asleep finally. I'd coughed, and I finally fell asleep, and as he said, the next thing I knew, he was on top of me. He told me very quickly if I listened and did what he said, I would be able to go to class the next day. I will probably say this once, and I will probably say it many times. He was very good at what he did. I remembered him maybe being there 3.5 hours. Bennett shared the time frame with you. He never once touched me with a glove on. He left half of a fingerprint. So when I tell you he was good at what he did, he was. I was number 5. He did not follow me. He did not know what I did. He told me that. When he was on top of me, he told me he thought he was busted. Because he said, I thought you saw me. So at some point I'd gotten up after I'd thought I'd fell asleep, and I'd gotten up, and when I walked back from the bathroom, where those windows and doors were, I saw a shadow. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. He told me that was him. He had used a credit card to get into that door. If Chief Jones was here, and Kendrick can tell you, I had asked the apartment complex for months to put a deadbolt on my door. I knew they weren't safe. Kendrick can attest that next day or the day of, my file was shredded at the apartment complex. Did they get deadbolts? Yeah, they did. When I said I had an amazing support team, I never went back to that apartment, except to go get some clothes before I went to the police station to give my testimony. I never went back. That's always been a part that was hard. Everyone's intentions were in the right place to get me out of there, but I didn't have closure to go back in there. They moved me with some friends, a classmate of mine's, him and his grandparents, and it was a great place to be. Our friends at the time wanted me to carry a gun. They wanted a backpack, or they wanted me to have a knife in my backpack. Those things I don't think would have mattered at the time. He was not at that stage, aggression or whatever. I had a cut here, and I had a cut on my face. A very good friend got married on that Saturday. I don't remember the wedding, but when you go back to your hometown from a Wednesday night to a Saturday, it took a lot away from their day. As they said, he ate chicken and noodle soup. He drank wine coolers. For years, I had trouble with wine coolers. I'm okay with chicken noodle soup now. I was worried. If those of you in the room that knew my dad got a video camera, and he was very proud of that video camera. It was in the closet, and I was afraid Belt was going to take that damn video camera. And then I was going to have to explain to my dad that, I don't have your video camera anymore. I don't know. Mark, what do you want to share?
Where do you want me to go?
I don't care. You help.
Stacy was very upset and really, for what she'd gone through, she did a very good job at stating what had happened to her. It gave us a lot of leads. We did get a DNA profile, which unfortunately happened to be flawed with the KBI, which sent us on a tangent, which I guess Stacy didn't know some of the things about her family that we found out. And we probably won't go into a lot of that stuff here, but some of that involved the, I guess, things that it's hard to talk about without saying things, and I don't want to bring stuff up that might embarrass the family. So I don't think I'm going to do that. But what happened was that the DNA that the Bureau first put out with us said it was a relative of Stacy's that had done this. And we went off on this tangent chasing all of her relatives to find out what was going on. And I think one of those things that we found out that the family kept pretty secret, not even her dad knew this, but that her dad had a twin. And that was kept very secret with the family. We did take a number of DNA samples from her family, and by the time everything was over with, we did get some other DNA, which led us to Mr. Bell.
I'll jump in and just say a few things here. Am I on? Not so much. I'll say a few more things here to give Stacy a minute. So some other details, not so much about the assaults, but about what he did. When Stacy said he was good at what he did, he had not only this ritual that he went through, but he was pretty good at cleaning up after himself. She said there was a half a smudge of a fingerprint. He was in the house, we know, before 3 o'clock, and I don't think I mentioned this when I went through the facts, but he took her to a bathroom afterwards, to a bathtub, ran water, and tried to clean her off while she's still duct taped all up. Still couldn't see she never could see his face. The women, the 14 women that I spoke to, some thought he was African American, some thought he was Hispanic, some thought he was a white man. Turns out he was a very husky, big, powerful white guy from McPherson. Kendrick's 5'10", 5'11", probably 240, big, powerful man, truck driver, something like that. Sound about right?
He was a big guy, yeah.
Yeah. And every time I walked in, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I said he was pretty husky.
Yeah. Every time I walked into court, he'd go, "Hey, Mark." I'm like, "Awesome. Hey, how we doing?" But the night at Stacy's, she asked him if he would cut her bindings off a little bit to at least give her a chance to get undone. And oddly enough, he cut some of them a little bit, not enough for her to get away. And but he made her bathe and so that he knew enough to know that he didn't.
Recording stopped.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to stop, but anyway, he washed the wine coolers in the sink. He washed the spoon he used to eat the chicken noodle soup with. I mean, he was meticulous, and she's not kidding. There was one smudged fingerprint, I think, if that. That was the only evidence. So I know later there's a panel discussion, but I'm gonna offer couple of editorials right now, and that is this. This case doesn't get made. We aren't here if she doesn't go to the hospital the next day. She would have suffered in silence. She would have never known who it was. There would have never been any closure of any kind. There is a law in Kansas, all statutes start with KSA, Kansas Statutes Annotated. You can look up in the old Google machine, KSA 65448, subsection B as in boy. And it says that you can go in and get an exam, and you don't have to tell the police. Even if you're not sure if you want to go to the police, even if your friend says, I just want to go take a shower, I want to forget about this. I understand that. But 72 hours later, 96 hours later, when maybe the initial emotion of the moment has passed, that DNA may not be there anymore. So as a prosecutor, I would suggest that you get that exam. I know what I'm asking, and I know it's not an easy ask to make, but it gives you options. It will give your friend options when he or she calls you. The statute was changed years ago to allow that exam, that SANE exam, sexual assault nurse examiner, to conduct that exam and collect those swabs and just hold on to them without alerting police while you decide if that's really what you want to do. It allows people to make decisions, to give them more options, because in the moment it's a hell of a lot to decide and process. So it's my one commentary for the evening thus far.
So for me, there never was a hesitation on calling law enforcement. I told him when he left I would call. That's why I asked him to loosen those binds. And it seemed like the telephone was miles away. I knew where the telephone was. And as he said, I couldn't see him. I could have told you what he looked like, and Kendrick can tell you. A few years later, there was a case. They hired a sketch artist in Salina, and he shows up. Kendrick made it his life goal. If Belt moved in the KDOC system, Kendrick knew. He was at my office. He was at my doorstep. When he was diagnosed with cancer, and it was pancreatic cancer, he came to the office and told me. When he died, he came to the office and told me before it hit the news. Bennett sent me a message on Messenger the night that he died. Law enforcement was definitely something that I didn't question. The first person I called was my mom. She was a nurse, and the first things out of her mouth were, you need to be tested for HIV. So not only had I dealt with a rape, now I knew I had to deal with HIV and what was going to happen and how many years it was going to take to go past that. Kendrick and Jones were not real proud of me and the friends that I called at the time. It had lightly snowed, so when we came out for the guys, and I called friends that were guys to take me to the ER, we messed up the crime scene. And you weren't real proud of that, were you, Mark?
No, we had some footprints and some tire prints that we tried to follow, and it didn't work out so well.
Yeah. So when I got to the ER, it was if I was being raped all over again. It was close to shift change. Nurses were mad because they wanted to go home. The doctor was really upset because he got woke up and he had to deal with it. Now you think about this in 1993, it's a whole different world than it is in 2026. In 1993, there wasn't something to Google. There wasn't books out there. There weren't things to help you understand that you didn't ask for this, you didn't do this. I was angry. And there's people in this room that would tell you I'm hard to deal with now. I was a bitch then. Did I know it at the time? There might be people now that think that too, and that's okay. Our group of friends, when we went back to classes, we did group counseling, trying to figure out, because everybody was dealing with it at a different, from a different place. Like I said, putting a knife in my backpack. Some of them sent mace with me, and one of them, the guy that I was seeing at the time, we had a shotgun on the floor by the bed, and in my mind was, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to wait and say, hey, can you pick this back up? I need to shoot you before you can. I asked him if I would ever see him again, and he told me that once he walked out that door, I'd never see him again. So this morning when we were in here getting the sound to work, one of them asked me if I was scared that he would come back. No, I took him for what he said. He told me if I listened, and Randy and Kendrick told me that my head is what saved my life, because I listened and I heard what he said. So those of you that doubt that about me, I do listen, okay? At the hospital, Jane worked for the sheriff's department, and what was her role again, Kendrick?
She was a matron with the Thomas County Sheriff's Office.
So obviously, to do the collection of everything in the rape kit, they couldn't come in, or at least at that point, they didn't come in. So Jane was the one that was there. She was holding my hand. She was telling me what was going to happen, what they were going to swab, what they were going to do. If it wouldn't have been for her, it would have been one of the worst experiences, right up there with the rape. But because Jane was there and could protect me, which is what the benefit of the sane staff at Hayes Medical Center is, I didn't ever question whether we were reporting it. The problem was we didn't have a name, and in 1993, if you didn't have a name, you couldn't file anything. So we were the second case that filed a warrant for a DNA profile, because the statute of limitations on sex crimes was 5 years, 2 at the time. So we had to have something so that if he was found, we went back that morning. He used duct tape and, I don't know, something else maybe. They went to the hardware store. They went to Walmart. They looked everywhere to see if they could find videos of him. When we went to the police station that morning, they asked. They played, how many tapes of sound of voices did you play me?
Too many to count.
Yeah.
He also tried to super glue your hands.
Yeah. And then that didn't work, and that pissed him off pretty bad. I said his voice was one of the deepest voices I had ever heard in my life. It was months later. I was on a farm with the guy that I was seeing at the time. We'd gotten in a pickup, and I literally lost it. There were gloves that had diesel fuel, and it wasn't fresh diesel fuel, and it wasn't old. It was kind of in that middle, and that's what it smelled like. That summer, the group of friends from Colby was going to Lake McConaughey. It got slipped that they were going, and Justin told me I wasn't invited because they could not stand to be around me. So bless my parents' heart that summer for dealing with that. I did go to High Plains Mental Health for counseling, and at that time, again, in 1993, domestic violence or sexual assaults were not something people reported. So the counselor I got basically told me that I needed to move on with my life and get over it, that there wasn't really anything they can do. I ended up with another counselor. She was great. I wasn't in a headspace at that time to have the counseling. Have I done it over the years? Yeah. I didn't ever question whether I was reporting. Because of Kendrick and Jones, and then because of Bennett, law enforcement made the difference for me. They were my trust place. Yes, did I call my mom first? Then did I call the guys to come get me? I was at the hospital, I think, before law enforcement got there. I think they took me to the hospital, but I don't know. I'm strong, and I had a roommate in Manhattan, and she got to catch some of the grief over the years, and yeah.
You mentioned something that just as another interesting part about this case. She said they were the second case. The Thomas County case was the second case. Let me explain that quickly. So without a known suspect name, The statute of limitations, I double-checked, it had actually changed to 5 years at that point. So in 93, it was 5 years. But by 98, no suspect, no warrant, and without a warrant, even if you walked into the police station in Colby a year later and said, I did it, you can't touch me, he would have been right. And so, credit where it's due, Ty Kaufman, who was a prosecutor in McPherson for 25-plus years, he had 5 or 6 of those cases. They knew they were all tied together by DNA. They didn't have a name, but they at least tied them all together by DNA, including Thomas County, including Reno County, including Saline County, et cetera. All of them, they knew they had one common suspect, but they didn't know his name. So rather than say State of Kansas versus John Doe, which would not have been specific enough to have passed a constitutional challenge later, in the early days of DNA, Ty asked the DNA analyst, says, well, describe this DNA stuff to me. How do you know one from the other? And they say, well, again, for the kids people who are forensic scientists or studying that, you have loci on the DNA chain. And at each loci, there are alleles, 2 alleles. And so what they did was they said, let's identify them by his DNA profile. The problem is Ty didn't speak scientist, and the scientist didn't speak prosecutor. And so he identified him by the loci instead of the alleles, meaning loci, we all have loci. We all have the same loci. It's what your alleles are at each one. And so what they did is they effectively identified him as a human, which was not sufficient. And so after the capital murder conviction, when he was given the death penalty, I then went around to McPherson, Reno, and Saline County and argued that those cases should have been allowed to proceed, and we could have proceeded with these rape cases. Went up to the Kansas Supreme Court, and while they applauded Ty's ingenuity and the ingenuity of the prosecutors in the early 90s who tried this, they said it was functionally not sufficient, and so they had to dismiss those. So he was never actually tried for any of his rapes because of the statute of limitations, but he did get the death penalty in Wichita, so there was some measure of justice in that respect, and because at least 6 of the women came to Wichita and got to tell their story, we all felt that, Stacy, I think, felt as miserable as that experience might have been, she did get to sit across the table, across the room from him, about as close as I am to you 3 ladies. That's where he was compared to Stacy, and she told her story, and he had to sit and listen to it.
He, as Bennett said, he had to listen. I was on the stand a little over an hour in Sedgwick County. That was in 2004, so Carter would have been not quite 2. My parents were there. Doug, my ex-husband, was there as well. When Bennett asked if I would come, I said the only way I will come is if Kendrick and Jones are there too. And they agreed to come. Tom Drees, who's now a judge here, who was an attorney, he was the Ellis County attorney at the time, he's the one that helped prep me. A lot of those things you forget, you want to forget still to this day. In a hotel, I have to be able to see the door. In every house I've lived in, I have to be able to see the door. My back can't be to it, consciously or subconsciously. It's because he was on top of me. As I said, he cut me from, if you can imagine it, he probably did it. As he said, he took me into the bathroom, did things there that you don't think about, but he was very careful, as he said. He cleaned everything up. And as I said, he never touched me with a pair of gloves on, but he would leave and I wouldn't know where he was. So that fear and that panic at the time when he would come back, because I had that cold, I couldn't smell quite as well. And he did, by the time the weekend came, I had bruising and I looked like a gem, I'm sure. But when you think back at some of those things, that fear of him coming back and what was going to happen next, I just kept telling myself, I'll get through this. This will be okay. I have family. I had to be in Mindy and Chris's wedding. I had things that had to happen. As the trial took place in Sedgwick County that day, when we were in the back chambers, the one thing I asked Bennett, I said, I need him to look at me. And he said, it's probably not going to happen. So I was almost done with my testimony, and Bennett asked if there was anything else I wanted to share, and I said yes. I said, I need you to know you did not win. I graduated from college. I got married. I have a career, and I have a child. You did not win. He dropped his pen, quit doodling, looked up at me, and I told him again, you did not win. He picked the pen up, and he started doodling again. And as far as I know, he didn't make eye contact with any of the other people. The trial was 30 to 40 days. He was very social, just like we were eating with family and Bennett before this afternoon, carrying on conversations. He asked what I did, what I was going to school for, you know, what was my family, what did I do, and just like that, he switched and told me to do this or to follow this. And just like that, he went back to this person that cared. He knew I had a test. He knew that I had to still get some sleep, but he knew I was probably going to go to the hospital. I can't explain the mentality or that. I told Kendrick and Jones that he was a big guy because I couldn't see. My nose wasn't working very well. I had my ears. And those of you that know me, I have big ears, okay? So in this instance, my ears helped. I knew his voice, and I knew that I'd always recognize it. One of the victims in McPherson, she worked with him. I'm pretty sure I would have lost it if I would have been working with the man. Her fear and anxiety prevented her from reporting at the time. For me, when the sketch artist came out from the Salina, he shows up and I said, it's not him, it's not big enough. When he caught him, when he was caught, Kendrick told me, you knew it, you nailed it, you knew what his size was. When he was caught and when he was in prison or in Sedgwick County Jail for the year, he was very social, played cards. He was the life of the criminals, I guess. So for him to get the death penalty, life without parole, he was in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, and as Bennett explained today, he basically had a dog pen. He got 1 hour out. That was probably the worst thing for him than anything because he didn't have that social side. Someone asked years ago if when the death penalty happened, if I would go. I don't think I would have. It wasn't going to change anything, and after we had the trial, I didn't need to. I would have been told, I would have been given the option. I don't think it would have mattered. And karma's a bitch. Pancreatic cancer is some of the worst cancer. And because he was in the KDOC system, he would have received pain meds, but he would not have received the same type of comfort and treatments that the average person would have had. What do you guys have?
I want to bring up, I guess, a little lighthearted interview that we had in this case. Randy and I ended up talking to a man during this case, and this was a first. We brought him in. He was wearing a wife beater shirt and overalls. We set him down in the chair and started to talk to him, and all of a sudden, this beetle comes out from under his overalls. I mean, a beetle. And it crawls out on the arm of the chair and kind of wiggles around a little bit and then goes right back into his overalls. That probably wouldn't have happened without this case. During this case, though, Stacy was a trooper. She'd been through a lot, but she overcame a lot.
Okay, so Stacy's asked me if I would maybe share a few of the, we've been pretty circumspect in talking about the details. I'm still going to be careful what I say here, but I will say this. Let me couch it this way. So, tried my first sexual assault case in 1998, 99, and over the course of the last 26, 7 years, about the only thing I've done is tried sex crimes and murders. And so, and then I review every single homicide that happens in Wichita. I have for the last 14 years. So I probably reviewed 500 or 600 murders. I review a lot of the sex crimes. And so what I'm getting at is I've seen a lot. And I can tell you that what Stacy endured is as bad as anything I've heard of an adult enduring. I've had a few child cases that cause you to question the humanity of your fellow humans. Had a couple of cases that just were, the brutality was beyond the pale with children. But for an adult, I've never known a case where someone endured what she did, and that she did, and was able to come into a courtroom years later was part of why I'm in haste tonight. But she did ask me to give a few more details, so I'll simply give you a couple of the 35,000-foot view here. I think I made it clear, but to be clear, she didn't see him because her eyes were duct taped shut round and around her head. Arms were duct taped behind her back. He obviously raped her. There was one of the ritualistic things that he did, which I always thought was just so bizarre, but every single woman endured this, was before the sex acts began, he took her to the bathroom and very carefully shaved her pubic hair off. He did it to every single woman. I've never heard of that happening in another case. Cut her shirt off in this very specific way. Every single shirt, you could have laid them out of all the women. They were all cut exactly the same way. Obviously, I'll just put it this way: every type, in any way that a person could be violated, he did. I do remember something you said at the time, and I remember I had reviewed every one of these cases. I had not. So when we tried this in 2002, my oldest child was about 3 or 4. My second child was just 1, and my little one, who's here tonight, but not born yet. My wife came into the office, and it was old school, it was old paper. And I had 93 ring binders, 4-inch binders, and she said, "What are all those cases?" I said, "That's one case, belt." It was all just the sexual assault stuff. So I had read all of it. And even having read it, you said something on the stand that I won't forget, that I just asked finally, and I remember thinking, I probably shouldn't ask this question. By the way, Tom, I see you back there. I hadn't seen you in a long time, man. It's good to see you. Tom Drees will say, yeah, prosecutors aren't supposed to ask this question, but I asked a question I didn't know the answer to. And I said, "Do you have any idea how many times he ejaculated?" And she said, "I lost track, around 8 or 10. I just remember going, kind of in that moment going, "Don't lose it." Just to myself going, God, sorry, there's priests here, so I won't tell you what I said. But I just remember going, even I in that moment could not believe, I believed it, but it just kind of rocked me for half a second. Then I caught myself and went, okay, and we asked the next question. So I think that's enough to give people an idea without being gratuitous, but it just goes to show you that. I'll say one other thing here, and I'm going to try to say this right, not be misinterpreted, but there is no right way for a victim of a crime like this to behave or to react or to be later. Of the 6 women who testified, they could not have reacted more differently to being in the man's presence. And while you could never replicate this, this is as close to saying every rape is different, but this is as close as I have ever heard of multiple rape victims enduring roughly the same set of acts. Some having more than others, etc. But the tying, the duct tape, the shaving, I mean, it was literally kind of like he had a list of 10 or 12 things he did. Each one of these women endured it, and each one of them came on the stand and reacted entirely differently. One gal, I thought if I'd have given her a baseball bat, she'd have walked over and beat him to death. I mean, she was so mad when she testified. The little gal from Malta was very demure and quiet and whispered. I mean, it was just a microcosm of, I couldn't believe how it was showing the jury the reality of the brutality of what each of these women endured, and it was just astonishing. I did tell Stacy I would tell her my favorite moment of the trial. She got done testifying, and I went and sat back down. This was a huge undertaking. At the time, it was 30,000 pages, I think. And my trial partner, Barry, who I think's watching from D.C., he's now a death penalty prosecutor for the federal government. He had handled the DNA. I had handled the sex crimes. And I remember sitting back down, and I apologize to all the priests and all the nice ladies in the audience, but I sat down and looked over at him. He goes, after she was testifying, he goes, "Fuck." And I went, "Pretty good." He goes, "Yeah." So, sorry. But it was that impactful just to see somebody have gone through all that and still summon the courage to walk into a courtroom, sit there, and answer the questions.
So you noticed he said that I was not the shy and quiet one. Back to the ER, because of Jane, they take pictures and pictures and pictures and pictures. So I worked at Gambino's Pizza, and shout out to Tawny and Ross. They're here. They came from Oklahoma today. They were with me afterwards. The pictures, I remember telling Jane, where are these pictures going to go? And she said they would go to Colby Photo. Well, Colby Photo, I cleaned Ardith's house. So I asked them to tell Ardith before those pictures, because back then the machines were right there. You could see them. If I remember right, their machines you could see from the window when you drove by. I said, please tell them who the victim is.
Stacy.
Again, go ahead.
Stacy, I had a chat with Ardith also, and she chose not to look at those photos that were taken. I'd given Jane my camera to do the photos, and I told Ardith, I said, these are what the photos are. I said, you know, it's your choice, but if I were you, I would just develop them and give them to me.
Yeah.
And that's what she did.
The other thing, knowing that I went to Manhattan that fall, graduated from Colby in May, from March to May, went home, and I mentioned that I was not the most pleasant person in the world. Went to Manhattan, and 6 months later, that was what the recommendation was, to be tested for HIV. So then you did that, and then you waited another 6 months. My faith was very important to me all the way back then. But at that point, if I would have been pregnant, I don't know that I could have kept a child and explained to that child where they came from. Now looking back at how horrible he would have been, I would have given it up for adoption, because I don't know how you would have explained that. And unfortunately for Belt, he has 2 children. The one son has followed in his footsteps and is in prison right now. I'm not giving Belt a pass. His dad was horrible. Bennett shared with us today that, and he'd shared with us before, community ladies in McPherson bought his mom a bus ticket and got her out of town before he killed her. Yeah, so the dad was that horrible, so Belt lived those things. Again, it's not a pass. And when I tell you, as I said before, that he was very good and he could carry on a conversation, probably if you met him on the street, you'd have no idea that that's how he was, because, I mean, you could have had tea and crumpets with him and you wouldn't have known how he was. After we did the trial, I had to go back upstairs, I think, to Bennett's office to fill out my travel requisition form, and Ron Evans, the defense attorney that represented Belt, was sitting there on the bench, and I looked at him and thanked him, and he looked at me like I'd lost my mind, and he said, "Why are you thanking me?" And I said, "Because luckily we live in America and he gets to have representation too." Needless to say, Ron Evans was probably not a fan of Belt, but he was doing his job. For those of you that are here that you've struggled with it, or you know of someone, it's okay that you haven't reported, but you can still report. You have amazing law enforcement in this community. There are people. I was blessed to have a support system from the morning that it happened all the way through, even till today. I sent messages. I have a lot of people that are here that drove a long ways from Oklahoma to my hometown to everywhere in between. I don't know. I don't know that at the time what the plan was and why I asked that question many times. I still don't know that any of us know. Maybe because I'm so strong or stubborn, whatever word you want to use, it can make a difference for someone. Something else? Without Kendrick and Jones staying in my corner, keeping me sane, if there is such a thing, I truly couldn't have done it. Several years ago, I was selected to be on a jury trial in Trego County. Kendrick was the one that did the case. I went and asked for private chambers with the judge and explained in this case that, just as I had said, I don't know that I would have kept the baby. I would have adopted it. I tried everything I could to get out of that case. They kept me, and I got to be the foreman of it. When it was over, and he ended up, the individual that had worked for the KBI retired, so it became his case. I even thought because I knew him, I would get kicked off. And they still kept me on there. Yeah, and so for the integrity of the staff and the law enforcement, they're here to protect you, whether you think so or not. And as Bennett said, you don't have to file a case. You can still provide the evidence so that if you ever decide to, you can. And you have, between law enforcement options and on campus, for those of you that go to school here, whether you're Catholic or not, Father Andy is right here across the street. That makes it convenient for you.
So I was going to tell one last story before we turn this over, and I think Aaron's going to give some a little bit, and then we'll take a break and then answer questions as a panel. But the one thing I remember the most about Stacy's testimony, in addition to Barry's funny thing he said, whispered to me, but the serious thing that I'll never forget is the witness stands, you don't sit like this in front of everybody. There's literally like a desk in front of you. So your legs are under the desk. The jury's to the side and can see a little bit, but the gallery cannot. And so I walked up to Stacy to talk to her, and I was very close to her. And at one point, so I would walk her in, asked her the questions. When we were done, I stood next to her and walked out to stand between her and Belt as I walked her out the side door. But when I got up to her, I could see her hands, and I'll show you what I saw. My hands are bigger than hers, so it's hard to see, but she was holding business cards, one in each hand. I couldn't see it exactly, and I didn't know why. Just thought, okay, maybe it's a prayer, something that looked like it was on a business card. And we stepped out in the hallway. Her folks and her husband at the time were coming around from the gallery to come into the side hallway to meet us there. Before they did, I said, one question, you mind if I ask? And she didn't remember this, but I'll never forget. I said, what's in your hands? She turned them over, and it was Kendrick's business card and Randy Jones' business card. I said, okay. I have told that story to every recruit class coming out of the Wichita Police Department for the last 10 years. I don't know what those guys did that night, but whatever strength it took that she had in herself to come into court 11 years later in Wichita and face the monster, the nightmare of her, the embodiment of her nightmare sitting there. She did so. It was made easier a little bit by the way those two men treated her. And I tell every cop that comes through the system, you just chose a profession. I don't care if you do this for one night and after tonight, you say this ain't for me and walk away. If you interact with somebody tonight, you have a chance. If you spend a career doing this, if you're a cop, and I could say the same thing for nurses, for SANEs, for therapists, for teachers, for anybody in the room. But you have an opportunity to change the way someone goes through their life. And I challenge them to live up to that. I said, you're following big footsteps. Live up to it. So that's my challenge to the recruit class each year. But I'll never forget that. That was something remarkable to me, that just holding the business cards was important enough to her that she kept them all those years and brought them with her to Wichita to testify. So when I say she was the best witness I ever saw, that was part of it.
Kendrick, do you have anything?
I don't think so. You did a good job.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you very much. What you just witnessed took extraordinary courage, and it is a gift to every single person in this room. Stacy's story is a reminder about why the systems that we build around survivors have to work. And tonight we want to make sure that you leave here knowing exactly how those systems work and how to access them. And so I'm going to have Detective Sergeant Aaron Larson of the Hayes Police Department come and walk us through what happens when someone reports, what options you have as a survivor, and what that path might look like. Aaron, and then after Aaron, then we're going to take a quick 15-minute break.
Hello. Like I said, my name is Aaron Larson. I'm Detective Sergeant with the Hayes Police Department. They asked me to kind of explain how we do things in Ellis County, or at least with the Hayes Police Department. At the beginning, Stacy mentioned that I'm the guy that didn't know what I was doing. She was right. So that day during that, we had that Saints Art meeting, and I was not prepared. I didn't know what was going to go on, and I have all these individuals show up in the hallway. They needed to be taken downstairs into the where we were going to be meeting, and so I went out there.
The holding room?
What's that?
The holding room?
And I was confused because it was Stacy, And I knew that I'd gotten rain barrels from Stacy, and I was totally baffled on what was going on. But we went downstairs, and she told her story, and I was moved. She talked about the God and the spiritual component of this, and I didn't tell her this, but something was talking to me. I told her afterwards, I asked her, I think basically I just asked, is this something that you thought you would be able to talk about in the future? Is this something that you would be able to present on or tell your story? Because I thought it was important. I thought it was something that people would want to hear if she's able to. And I could feel the hurt in her heart, and I thought that would maybe help. And so I just made the suggestion to you. I think others have encouraged you to do that. I'm not responsible for tonight. I wouldn't take credit for that at all. But I just thought that she would take it, and then others. I think Aaron was part of that. Tricia Haskell with Hayes Medical Center. I think they were big components. Aniston was big on there she is. With options and setting up tonight. But I felt something telling me that I needed to say something to you in that meeting, and I probably typically wouldn't. Those that know me, I might not say something like that, but I felt like that was important that day. So that's why I said that.
So it's your fault.
Not my fault. I'm so proud that she's here and that she's talking, and I'm proud that we had this kind of a turnout. I'll preface by saying that reporting looks different, probably communities across Kansas. It's going to be different in Kansas City, probably in Wichita, as it's going to be in Hayes, or a smaller community like Hoxie or Oberlin. I graduated from Oberlin High School, Decatur County Community High School, in '93, just down the road from Norton. So when she was going to college, I was coming to college at Fort Hayes. But the response is going to be different based on the community. So something like Oberlin, or if it happened in Norton, they're going to have a different response than they would have had here. Back in '93, the response was different than what you would see today. When I was a newer detective, we were taking our survivors to Salina. We didn't have a SANE program at Hayes Medical Center. We didn't have it, I think maybe 2012. I don't know if somebody knows. Well, 2010. So we were taking our survivors to Salina. Can you imagine being a victim of a sexual assault and having to drive, sometimes on your own or with somebody else? Maybe, I'm not sure if advocates maybe at the time drove you to Salina just so you could have an exam. How traumatizing that would be. We're so fortunate now to have a program here where someplace like Hoxie or Oberlin or Norton, if it happened there, they'd have to drive to Hayes or drive somewhere else. And so the response is different. So we're fortunate here. It's just based on resources. We're fortunate that we have options. We're fortunate that we can call advocates any time of the night and have advocates with options to come sit with our survivors. We're fortunate to have that SANE program. Jurisdictions are going to handle it different. What I do here may not be what they do somewhere else. It may not be what they do in Wichita or Sedgwick County. It may not be what they do different in Colby. The situation could be totally different. Situations are different in most cases, but the overall response here is generally the same. I say that they're different, and some of the reasons why they're different is because survivors sometimes report right away. Oftentimes they're reporting hours later, sometimes days later, sometimes weeks later, and sometimes years later. So there's a difference on how we handle all of those different situations. Sometimes they'll have a family friend with them. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll be by themselves. They'll either have a family or a friend with them. Sometimes they won't. They'll be by themselves and they're reporting. Usually what happens is, in those cases, is that I'll ask them, are you okay with, I explain to them what options does, is my first thing. I explain to them how options is available, what they do. They're available to have an advocate sit with you. I see that you brought a friend or you have a family member. If you just want them, you can just have them. If you want an advocate to come to help you walk through this journey, I'll be happy to call them. And so that's usually the first thing. The next thing I say is that I'm going to ask you so many questions. Some of them are very difficult. I'm very detailed. And the reason why I ask those questions is because I have to answer questions in court. Those questions are very difficult. You're going to talk about some things that I don't want to hear from you. You're not going to want to tell me, and I don't want to hear them. You're going to be just as embarrassed to tell me as I'm embarrassed to ask you the question. But I let them know up front. That's what's going to happen. I want them to get comfortable with me, and if they're not comfortable with me, I'll find somebody that they can be comfortable with. If you were just a female that was sexually assaulted by a male, you may not want to talk to me as a male, right? So we try to work through those things. Sometimes they may or may not want a SANE exam. Sometimes they've already been there. They've already got it done. So we have to walk through that. I have to explain the process. A SANE exam, a sexual assault nurse exam. That's what SANE stands for. Sometimes they want that. Sometimes they don't. We encourage them to do those things if they're willing. Sometimes our survivor is not feeling well. They just had something very traumatic happen. So maybe we don't want to interview them right away. Sometimes we want to wait. Sometimes they're tired. Sometimes they're intoxicated. There's a whole lot of factors. Sometimes I want to do the SANE exam first and interview them later, maybe days later. The reason why is because I know some of the medications that we give them during the SANE exam to treat some of the STDs or other things are going to make them nauseous. They're not going to want to talk to me for an hour or two about what happened to them right after that. So maybe we want to do the SANE exam and interview later. So the circumstances are always changing. Like I said, sometimes they're even just coming from the SANE exam. They reported to the hospital. And so maybe they're ready for the interview. So in general, when a survivor reports, I'll usually interview them. Sometimes a patrol officer has talked to them first, and then they'll call a detective once they've established the jurisdiction. Sometimes we've had people come in, they think that the incident occurred in Hayes, but it actually occurred in Ellis County or outside of my jurisdiction, and so we have to establish jurisdiction to find out who should be doing the interview and those kind of things. I check to see if they want an advocate. I then contact the hospital to see about setting up the SANE exam, and then we get that scheduled. Sometimes the SANE exam can happen right then. Sometimes it has to wait because of not having a trained nurse to do the exam, those kind of things. Some important things to remember. Adults can choose not to disclose to law enforcement. They could just simply go get a SANE exam. That SANE exam is paid by Ellis County in our jurisdiction. I think that's state statute. It's by state statute. The exam is actually paid for. You're not required to pay the exam. There are some other things that if you had to be treated for that would be your own responsibility, but the SANE exam itself is paid by Ellis County. But you can choose, as a survivor, you can choose not to report to law enforcement, and that's why we encourage, like Mark was saying earlier, is that it's good to go get that exam done because we can then preserve the evidence for future. If the SANE exam is not done right away, or there's certain timelines and guidelines and all that kind of stuff of when it should be done, if it's not done right away, we could lose that evidence that may be wanted later. So it's always good to go get the SANE exam. So if you have friends out there, I know we have some college students, and encourage your friends, even if not a college student, encourage your friends to at least get the exam done and preserve that evidence. what happens is they assign it a number, and they can probably explain it more, but they'll assign you a number through the KBI. They'll send that kit, that SANE kit. It's a sexual assault evidence collection kit. They'll send that to the lab with a number, and then you decide that you want to report it later. They'll give us that number, and then we can contact the lab, and we can have the lab test the evidence. So even if we don't want to talk to law enforcement or report to law enforcement right away, at least get the exam done. Juveniles, kind of a different story because we're mandatory reporters. So on juveniles who report, we still have to file a report with the Department for Children and Families, DCF, and law enforcement gets notified of those to investigate. There's other factors that we consider when we're doing an investigation. One of those being, who's the suspect? Do we need to arrest the suspect right away? Other thing is evidence collection. Do we need to collect evidence right away? Some of those things are the things that I'm doing while the SANE exam is going on. I'm trying to work on those individual things. Is there video? Do I need to get video? Do I need to get phones? Do I need to get the suspect? Do I need to preserve a crime scene? All those different things, those are things that we're working on while the SANE exam is going on, usually. So I think that's all I would have.
All right, thank you, Aaron. We're going to take a 15-minute break right before our panel discussion, so take some time to decompress and stretch and take care of yourselves. I want to invite you to go out into the lobby. There are a number of resources that are available in our community, resources about options and several other organizations. Take what speaks to you, please. And if you'd like to speak privately to an advocate, just come up to our table and let someone there know, or if you see someone with a Compass sticker, you can grab them. If you are moved to support this work, there's an opportunity to leave a donation. Take your time, and we will. Oh, Stacy has one more thing.
Okay,
Thank
I'm
you.
going to share a couple things as Aaron was talking. One of the things I don't think I shared was at one point I asked him why me, and he told me I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Which for anyone that has experienced it, it was my apartment, it was my place. There is no wrong place or wrong time. Today's scripture for April 6th today was about being in the right place at the right time. I told you a quirk on where I sleep in a room and I have to face a door. The other thing, if you ever see me in a restaurant, my back will not be to a door. Those are not things consciously that I've thought of. They've just happened over the years. And the other thing, when he talked about the interview process at Law Enforcement Center, I don't remember the interview process. I remember playing the tapes and then showing me pictures even though I couldn't see anything. When he said the questions are hard, are those things? They asked the questions, I gave the answers, and all of those years later, it helped build the case for Belt so that he could be caught. And so it made Bennett's job much easier. And for those of you that hate my details, in this instance, the details paid off.
Thank you.
Convoluted, but maybe it wasn't.
That's right. So, okay, so there's the one Aaron, Jessica, you, and Mark, and Stacy.
Okay, well then never mind.
We're
I
good?
think we need to put a time cap on it. 30 minutes. 11. I don't want people to start going off.
Yeah.
So
So,
we say 30 minutes for a panel intimidation.
okay. I think so too. Yeah, and if it seems to grow,
Yeah.
then we can just,
We need to talk about it. Wiggly.
right, we're going to be. Hello? Hello? All right, welcome back. We're going to start settling in, and I'd like to call our panelists up to the stage, please. Yeah, good. So Colleen needs a mic, and Aaron, you need a mic. Okay, can you guys share? Can you guys share? Yeah. Yeah, he's good. All right, welcome back. Our panel tonight brings together the professionals who make up the backbone of sexual assault response in our community. Law enforcement, legal advocacy, medical expertise, direct victim services, and I want to take a moment to introduce each of them. We have Aaron Cunningham. Give a little wave there, Aaron. Serves as our Ellis County attorney. He is responsible for the prosecution of criminal cases in Ellis County and has been a key partner in strengthening our community's response to sexual violence. Jessica Albers, give a little wave, is a sexual assault response nurse, otherwise known as a SANE nurse, at Hayes Medical Center. SANE nurses receive specialized training to provide compassionate, trauma-informed care to survivors and to collect the forensic evidence that can be used in criminal cases. Aniston Weber, we'll wave, is our sexual assault response coordinator. That is not her title. It's very long and I've forgotten it. She works for us at Options. Aniston works directly with survivors to navigate the aftermath of sexual assault, connecting them with services, standing alongside them through their reporting process, and making sure that they know every option that they have available to them along the way. We have Aaron Larson. We introduced him earlier, Detective Sergeant with Hayes Police Department. He's going to be in the audience helping take questions. Aaron investigates sexual assault cases and works closely with advocates, medical providers, and prosecutors to build the best case possible. And then we have Colleen Brooks, also a member of our SART team. And we're joined again by the Marks, who bring this conversation and their very deep experience to prosecution and investigation. So we're going to open up the panel to the audience. So if you have a question, just shoot your hand up like Horseshack from Mr. Cotter. Oops, I just said how old I am.
This is the former county attorney, that's why I asked if he seriously had a question.
First of all, thank you for sharing, Stacy. Really impactful. I hate to put the focus on the defendant, but I'm curious to know, compound question here, was he interviewed? Was there any confession? And then if not, at his sentencing during his allocution, did he show any remorse whatsoever for his crimes?
So that would probably be for me to answer. You hear that? Yeah, all right. By the way, Bishop asked a question. I should probably clarify this. I'm not sure it was clear. He committed his rapes, so far as we know, dating back from 89 to at least 94 or 5. He then went to prison in McPherson for a burglary of a business, I think it was. While he was there, he met Chris Branch, who was the boyfriend of Lucille. He gets out in early 2000, 2001. They're both on parole. They run into each other in this apartment complex. He commits his murder of Lucille in 2002. So, and then all the DNA comes cascading in late 2003, I think it was. We dismissed the murder charge, refiled the capital. So that was I wanted to clarify that in case, if he wasn't the only one who I confused, I want to make sure that was clear. So the question is, he was interviewed multiple times for multiple things. In the murder, he was interviewed the night of, because we were thinking Chris was the suspect. He's the one with the documented history of beating on Lucille. So they talked to him. I will say, credit where it's due, if you're still watching from DC, he listens to the first interview, and Belt said something under his breath, and he said, I got following it. And he said, listen to that. We turned it up, and he said, I got to following her. And he followed her to that apartment. The detective who did the interview, good detective, lot of years on the department, he just didn't hear it. I mean, he mumbled it. And so then they go back and interview him again. Now that his DNA comes in, they know he was there, and he acknowledges that he was there, acknowledged that he and Lucille had engaged in his words, hanky-panky, and then she turned him down, and he left when there was a knock at the front door, and he split, blaming it on someone else. So he never in the interviews acknowledged being responsible for the homicides. McPherson, the chief of the police at McPherson, thought that Belt was a suspect in their rapes fairly early on, after the third or fourth one, and zeroed in on him, but could never get him to admit it. And so we'll go down a rabbit hole if I go here, but there was a mistake in the lab, and 2 swabs were switched around, and so he was cleared as a suspect at one point. It was just in a clerical error in the early days of DNA before we digitized everything and had all the systems in place now to avoid that sort of thing ever happening again. I've never heard of it happening since. During the trial, there is a point at what they call allocution, when in the second stage of a death penalty case, the defendant gets to say something to the jury to try to basically say, because in Kansas, we have a very unique death penalty. The jury can consider anything it wants, including mercy. You could just ask them not to institute the death penalty. We're very open about that. And so he asked if he could speak to the jury. And I remember distinctly Barry and I whispering to each other, should we object so that we could cross-examine him? And we thought, no, he will fumble this. And he stood up and said, it's not funny, because he was literally begging for his life, but he said, I know you people probably think I'm a monster. And he said, Munster, not monster. And we all kind of went, everybody in the room kind of leaned forward. It was like, did he say Munster or monster? And it just sort of fell flat. And he said, I'm not a monster, I didn't do this. And he denied that he'd done anything. It was just very underwhelming. The jury obviously did not find mercy and sentenced him to the death row. Just keep things moving. I know there's one question that was asked of us ahead of time, and I looked at this. People ask about the statute of limitations and what that means and why it is and how it works in Kansas. It's fairly complicated, so I'm sure somebody wants to know, and I'll answer it best I can. Statute of limitations is there for a reason. If someone comes to you and says, what were you doing on, April 7th, April 6th, 15 years ago, you're going to go, I have no idea, unless you kept a Franklin Covey planner and could write it down. And some of you again say they probably do that. If you know what a payphone is, then you might know what a Franklin Covey planner is. So, but most of us don't. And so the idea is at some point, it's incumbent upon victims of crime to come forward. It's incumbent upon law enforcement to solve the crimes. And if not, then you shouldn't be held to. Our system is based upon a lot of bad things that happen in other countries from which our ancestors in this country fled. They didn't like being locked in the Tower of London without being told what they had done, etc. That's where our due process and all these things come from. So in the abstract, it's a good idea. It's a good thing. You don't want to have somebody come up and go, I accuse you of a crime that I say you did 20 years ago. Now prove your innocence. So that's why we have such a thing as a statute of limitations. However, it's one thing to not report the car burglary when your stereo was stolen. And if you don't get around to it for 2 or 3 years, okay, you might just have to eat that. But we've come to realize that things like sexual assault are not just, the decision to disclose is not an event, it's a process. She's the exception. By coming forward the night of, knowing that she was going to get that exam, knowing that she was going to talk to the cops, knowing that she was going to press forward, it made her case infinitely easier. It did, I'm not going to lie. The quicker we get information, the better it is. But it still took 11 years before DNA technology caught up. It has now caught up. But going back in time, back to the statute of limitations, when our laws were codified into statutes, it used to be a common law that we went by, but in the early 60s, I think it was 63, they codified the law in Kansas and put them into the Kansas statutes. At that time, the statute of limitations for crimes was 2 years. The exceptions being first-degree murder and I think treason. There was still a treason statute on the books. That then changed. The laws were changed a couple of times, and I wrote it down here. In 1986, it went to 5 years, effective July 1st of 1986. So from that day forward, it was a 5-year statute of limitations. In 1994, we added what's called a tolling statute. And that meant if the person, for instance, left the state of Kansas, the suspect fled, the statute, think of the statute as like a ticking clock, and someone grabbed the clock and stopped it. It quits ticking when the suspect left the state. And so that was instituted in 94. In 2016, rape and aggravated criminal sodomy, which is to be gratuitous but be blunt, we're all adults here, anal sodomy, forced anal sodomy, forced oral sodomy, they eliminated the statute of limitations. And then in July 1st of 23, they eliminated the statute of limitations for all sex crimes. So that might lead one to say, okay, my rape case from 1986, 1991, can they now, because the statute was changed, go back and breathe new life into that old case? The answer is no. The statute moves forward, not in retrospect. It's called ex post facto is the technical terminology, but if your statute of limitations on the crime has run, there's no way to breathe new life into it. There is one other exception. In 2001, I believe, we added an ability to add within 1 year of a DNA solving your case. We got 1 year to prove the case, then that was another thing that was added. There is one, I don't, again, keep this fairly high level, but there's one other part of the calculus. There's a statute, or there's a case from the appellate courts of Kansas called Nunn. I think it was about 89, something like that, that said if the statute had not yet run when a new law was passed, then that case carries along with the new law. Meaning, so when in 2023, when we went to no statute of limitations, if there had been a case that had occurred as early as, let's see here, 2014, and the statute of limitations was 10 years, and it would have run in 2024, but it hadn't yet run, and so in 23, when the statute is now lifetime, that 2014 case gets the benefit of that. So as we sit here today, about the latest we could go back in time would be 2014. One exception is if the suspect took off and left the state of Kansas. There are other nuances, and you get down in a very fine parsing of statutory subsections, but that's sort of a high-level point, which is to say we have adjusted our assessment of the statute of limitations over the last 30, 40 years, and now it's lifetime for sex crimes. That will benefit people in the future. There's going to be a limited window of cases that are not going to get the benefit of that, but as each year passes, those cases get that much older, and the new cases will be the beneficiaries of this. So here's the big picture. Okay, I don't understand anything he just said. You confused me with a bunch of numbers. What am I supposed to do? If you think you have a case or someone that wants to come forward, I would rather you report it. I would rather you report it, if nothing else, because maybe someone else is going to report something involving the same person. And if that happens, that other case that you're reporting from 15 years ago that I can't prosecute, I might be able to breathe it into my case. The way Stacy came to Wichita, Thomas County case was never prosecuted, but she was instrumental in getting this guy the punishment he deserved in Wichita, because I was able to bring in her case because she reported it. Even though the statute had run on her case from 93, by the time 2004 came around, it still was able to be used. So I would encourage you to if you can, come forward, at least make a statement to the police.
Got a question down here.
Yeah, Stacy, you mentioned that one of the victims too was a co-worker of this Belt man. What did he do for a living? And after they found this out, it seems like he was all over the place. How did he could he keep a job? Did the people that he worked with, did they find him odd or I don't know, keep a job? I don't know. Just thoughts.
So the question is, I mentioned that a coworker that he worked with knew it was him, but had anxiety, was anxious, couldn't report him. We know that he drove truck, over-the-road truck driver. So my case, we think he parked in a trailer parking lot. I thought it was the apartments right north of the apartment complex, Dean, you know, but it wasn't. We think it's out by the interstate at the time. I don't know, in McPherson, he worked in a factory, right? That's what he did there. So yeah, I don't know that he could or couldn't keep a job. He was in jail and prison for part of the time. So yeah, I mean, I think he struggled in general.
He ran a machine and he was an over-the-road truck driver primarily. In terms of people knowing him, he was he was just a big, gruff guy, but around men, he was kind of, you know, drinking beer with you and smoked heavily. That was the other thing that the woman from McPherson who knew, she knew it was, she, you know, said when he'd come around that literally the hair on the back of her neck would stand up. She smelled him. She told the cops that night he was smoking Marlboro Reds, not cigarettes, not Marlboro Reds. She knew it, and he smelled of Marlboro Reds, and that was one of the reasons she knew it was him. But she was nervous, but she also was like, what am I gonna do? Go turn him in because he smells like Marlboro? I mean, that wasn't evidence as far as she was concerned, so it was you know, but she knew it. So he was just I'm trying to put a way to put him, and maybe Kendrick's got an idea too, but just a kind of a blue-collar, beer-drinking guy, but he had a very dark streak that people didn't know.
And for me, I told you that I had head congestion and I couldn't, my nose wasn't working correctly, but I knew there was something to do with that diesel fuel. I don't remember the cigarette smell, which I'm sure that he did that, and I'm surprised that I don't, and maybe I did at the time when I gave my statement because my grandmother smoked 24 packs a day. So I would have thought that would have been something I remembered, but, and maybe I do. Oh, yep, smoked at least 2 cigarettes is what my statement says. So, yeah, so I guess he did. But there were just certain things, and, you know, for every survivor, there's going to be things that trigger it. Again, I wouldn't have not reported, and he was smart enough to know that I was going to. And I don't know what that says about him, and I guess I haven't asked Kendrick or Bennett, did he have those conversations with the other victims? Was he as social with them as he was with me, or was it just because I like to talk?
I went through some of this again the other night and reread the 455 motion, that's what it's called, that I filed 22 years ago. And I think some of it, I'll be honest with you, I'm not trying to just be funny or something, it was that you engaged, you talked, you tried to disarm him by talking and you didn't back down.
Sorry.
Yeah, but some of them he threatened, like I said, the deaf girl, he just beat mercilessly. The others, there was a lot less talking because they were not able to speak. And so I think if someone was going to talk, he was a BSer big time. So.
And I think that goes to what Kendrick and Jones said. I used my head and I listened and I did what he said, and I could tell that he wanted to socialize and talk. So I think that's definitely part of it.
One thing I noticed is his physical violence, punching and hitting, was worse early. He got to the point by the time he had gotten to Stacy, he was pretty comfortable, obviously, drinking wine coolers and eating cans of Campbell soup. Stayed in there from at least probably somewhere around 2 a.m. to 5:12 a.m. is when she finally got the duct tape off her face. 3.5, 4 hours in a house. I've never heard of a rapist staying in a home like that long. It's insane. He was comfortable. He got more comfortable. It was like he was calm with you. He was going to be there until he was done doing what he was doing. With the earlier ones, he was more aggressive, punching people, you know, smacking them, lots of threats. I'll cut you into little pieces, you know, all sorts of really vile, horrible threats. There was less of that. I don't remember reading not as much of that with you. So
I think when he cut me the first time, that's what on my hand, and that's because I'd reached to pull the knife away from my face, and I had a little cut here. He told me if I listened, he wouldn't hurt me. So that was part of the process running through my mind. But the other thing was asking God to get me through this, because that was what I needed. He was the one that I knew could do that, because there wasn't anybody else there. And again, that stupid video camera, I needed to make sure my dad got that video camera back.
We have one over here.
So my question is for Aniston. Can you tell everyone a bit about what types of assistance and advocacy services that are offered by Options?
I'll do my best. We do a lot. So first, all of the services offered by Options are free, voluntary, and confidential. When I say free, I mean if you walk into our doors, you will never be charged anything for any service that we provide. Voluntary in that we will never force someone to report if that is not what they are wanting to do. We will not force someone to receive SANE services if that's not what they want to do. We will encourage it, but we will not force. And what a survivor does or does not do is not contingent upon receiving services. So they can still receive services whether or not they choose to report. And voluntary, confidential, that's the one. When a survivor comes and speaks with us, what they say to an advocate stays between the advocate and the survivor until they want help going forward and reporting or telling someone together. We hold confidentiality very close to our chests. We really abide by that at our organization. As far as some of the services that we offer, me in particular, my job puts me on campus a lot. So I'm working directly with college students, high school students, and I'm meeting with them one-on-one. We're chatting about, situations that might have happened in the past, situations that they've seen with their friends. We're doing those communications about healthy relationships. Our organization offers support groups in multiple forms. We host one in Colby and Thomas County. We host one here in Hayes, and then we also have a sexual assault support group here at Fort Hayes. So we are taking those opportunities to meet with people one-on-one and just chat through their situation. We also provide medical advocacy, so we can go to a SANE exam with the person if that's what they're wanting. We actually have an agreement with Hayes Med. If someone comes in and requests a SANE, Hayes Med will call Options and we will respond and we will meet with them and explain the process, try to get them as comfortable and prepared as possible. We do that same thing with law enforcement. If someone goes in to report, law enforcement can call us and we can be there for the survivor. We also provide financial assistance in some cases. People, when they're experiencing abuse, oftentimes have to pick up everything and leave, and that's very expensive. So we can assist with housing costs, rental assistance, personal items, essentially anything that you can think of that someone might need when escaping, leaving, or healing from an abusive relationship. That's what we're here to do. I hope that sufficiently answered your question.
And I'll add to that. I'm not from Hayes, so I can say this without, I get nothing out of this. If you're here tonight and you're wondering how you can help, a couple of things. Things like gas cards. One of the things we're talking about here is an extraordinary case because for a whole host of reasons. We've touched on this. Here's another thing that's extraordinary. This is a stranger case, a home invasion by a stranger. That is unique. That is not the norm. That is not how, it's like getting struck by lightning while you're getting struck by lightning. Most women, men for that matter, young kids who are the victims of sexual violence are victims of sexual violence. And I don't mean most. I'll say a number that I've always learned, 80%. You guys can correct me if you have a different number, but 80%, especially of children, I know for sure, and it's very high for adults as well. They're victimized, they're attacked, the sexual violence they endure is at the hands of someone they know. They need to get away from that, to have a place to stay the next day, the set of wheels they get around town. They need gas cards, they need a new set of clothes, etc. If you'd like to help in this environment, I guarantee you there's a way that you can set up a donation, $20 a month that goes to these folks, make it part of your your monthly routine. You just do it, and you never have to write the check and think about it and miss it. These groups have to go out and beg for money from their county commissions, from having donations, grants, et cetera. It's tough for them to continue to meet the burden of what they're doing every night. So I'll ask for them so they don't have to. Donations would help.
Thank you.
Jessica,
Didn't ask me to do that.
Jessica, can you just give us an overview of the SANE program at HaysMed?
The SANE program at HaysMed's been in place since 2010. We have a small team of nurses that are specially trained to do this work. And part of what we do is provide compassionate and very comprehensive care. So the main thing that we want to do when a patient comes to see us is to make sure that they're healthy and they're safe. That's our primary purpose and our primary goal, making sure that they get the health care that they need, that we treat any injuries or any illnesses that they might have, offer them medication for prevention of infections as well as pregnancy if that's a concern. And then in the course of doing all of that, we can also collect evidence if that's something that they would like. So Stacy mentioned the photographs, and that is something that we would typically offer to a patient, but everything that we do is voluntary. So we'll explain it to the patient, we'll give them what their options are, we can make adjustments, we can kind of think outside of the box if a patient doesn't want to do a certain thing. Or if they ultimately decide they don't want to do a certain step or even the whole exam, that's okay. So we're there to help give them information so that they can make the right choice for themselves in the time that they're there with us. Is after the, and I'll mention the photos just because a lot of things have changed, I think, over the years. The photographs now are kept very private. They're actually in almost all programs now digital photographs, and they are kept on a encrypted, military level encrypted server. They're kept separate from the medical records, so they're not a part of anything that any other healthcare provider in the facility would be able to even access. It's a completely separate program that only the forensic nurses have access to. That confidentiality kind of spans the entire occurrence with us. So making sure that everything is as private as we possibly can keep that. If you're reporting to law enforcement, then those records, because you've reported to law enforcement, will go to law enforcement and the county attorney where the crime happened. And that's to make sure that they can continue their work with you and investigate the case fully as best they can. If you don't report to law enforcement, that's an option that people who are 18 and over have the choice to do that. That evidence is collected just like we normally would. We send that evidence to Topeka where it's stored for up to 20 years. That was extended a few years ago out to that 20 years to give people, again, more options and choices to decide, to have that time to think and decide if they at any point in time want to make a report, then that can be connected back to their name, and then law enforcement can ask for that to be tested. So it's just an extra availability for someone who's not sure if they want to report. They can come and get that information. We do that medical exam, make sure they're healthy, safe, and then preserve all of that information and evidence so that it can be used later if they choose to.
Thank you. I think I see a question back there.
The other side is failing me. I'm in competition with Colleen, so please raise your hands.
I just wanted to know about, you talked about all the doctors and nurses that are involved. What about mental health? Is there mental health counseling or some kind of emotional support for the person that's reporting or that's come in for help?
So at the hospital, our normal response is to contact options, and we have them come to the facility. And then once they're there, we offer that to the patient. If we asked the patient, do you want us to call an advocate? Unfortunately, a lot of times they would say no because they feel like they're inconveniencing someone and they don't want to put someone out in the middle of the night. And so that's our normal response is we contact options, they arrive, and then we offer that to the patient. They're a lot more, open to that because they're not inconveniencing anybody. And they provide peer support during the time of the examination. And then after the exam is over, that's where we can help get them connected with other resources like, counselors or therapists. So making sure that those referrals are made. And that's the important thing I think about the SART and the way it operates is that no matter where the patient or the victim survivor starts, if they start with options, they're going to make sure that they know about reporting and about the hospital and what those choices are. If they start with us at the hospital, same thing. We're going to make sure they know what their options about reporting are, and we're going to make sure that they know that there's an advocate available to them. So the response is a community response, making sure that we're providing the same resources and the same opportunities for everyone to get the same level of compassionate care, no matter where they start in the system.
So that was my mom, so that counts to me. Victims Compensation Board, I think that kind of plays into that. Aaron, do you have anything that you can talk to about that? Do you know enough about that?
Sure. So one of the services that is offered in the state of Kansas is the Victims Compensation Board, and really it is primarily structured around crimes such as this. And it is a lot of the time when people commit these types of offenses and do these types of things, at the end of a trial or at the end of a conviction, we can sentence them and we can order a judge can order restitution. But these people don't have any money, and if the prosecutor's done their job well, they're going to prison for a very long time, or they're not going to be able to pay any of that restitution. And so that's where the Victims Compensation Board comes in, and you can work with the Attorney General's office, make application and receive compensation for things like medical bills, things like counseling services, mental health services that you undergo as a direct result of being a survivor of that crime. And so that's kind of what the Victim Compensation Board's all about.
Just so you know, the cap on that, because I happen to know it, for therapy is $5,000. That's the cap.
Yeah, and any advocate at Options can walk anyone through how to apply for victims' compensation.
She's going to make me run all the way to the top.
Mm-hmm. You
need
wanted
the
that side,
exercise.
Aaron.
You need to work out, Larson, anyway.
First, I want to compliment you all for the presentation tonight. It's very good. In this room, there's probably more of us that may have an opportunity to sit on a jury. From your perspective or your experiences, what education would you like to give to a jury as they're listening to these cases?
Thank you for that question.
That's a great question.
So, yeah, sexual assault cases are the hardest kind of cases to prosecute. I don't know if Mark feels the same way, but certainly I feel that way. I'd rather handle a homicide any day. And I think a lot of it comes from societal stigmas regarding sexual assault. I blame the media for some of this. I think there's an idea that a rapist looks like this particular person doing this particular thing, or victims look like this particular person reacting this particular way. And the reality, some of what we've seen in Stacy's story is it can look totally different across different people. Rapists come in all shapes and sizes and personalities, and unfortunately, victims do as well. I have victims that are criticized by juries because they're too cold and too distant, and they don't seem sincere enough in their sorrow. I have victims that are criticized for being too emotional. I have victims, or colleagues of mine have had victims that, well, because they were drinking, they invited this, because they were out at the bars, they were asking for this, because they were wearing this or that, then they wanted this. And so one of the things that I try to educate juries on and make sure we're on the same page with is consent is key to all sexual interactions, okay? They either have to be able to legally give consent or they have to give that consent and not revoke that consent. And not every rape case is as extreme as this, right? Not everyone's getting bound and everyone's getting duct taped and held at knife point. If two people start engaging in sexual acts, one individual says, I'm not comfortable doing that, I don't want to do that, and someone continues to move forward, that's still rape. And that's probably the hardest thing to convince a jury of, because we have this binary mindset of, well, they consented, so they consented. But consent can be withdrawn. And so that's one thing I want to make sure that I educate my jurors on. Another thing that I want to make sure they understand is just how difficult and awkward and uncomfortable it is for someone to get on the stand and talk about what in their mind is probably one of their most traumatizing and humiliating moments. And so one way I do that is I find someone on the jury that has kids, that I know that from their questionnaire, and I ask them, so is it safe to assume that you've had sex a few times? And they'll, kind of bashfully acknowledge that. And then I'll ask them if they'd like to describe to the rest of the panel and everyone in the gallery, step by step, what that sex act was like. And they're not terribly comfortable with that. And then I explain, neither is my victim, who didn't choose to have that done to them. And so a lot of it is just educating the community on a lot of our expectations of what a rape should look like isn't what's required to prove a rape. We just are so inundated from media that it's got to be this violent, terrible thing, but the vast majority of the time, it's people who have had consensual sexual relations in the past, but on that occasion or in that particular sex act, consent was not present, and they can still be held accountable.
Try to make sure they understand there's a difference between submission and consent. Just because violence is threatened and someone says, I'll just get it over with, it's not a consensual act. That's, I think, one of the big misconceptions, number one. And number two, when I talk to juries in what's called voir dire, the jury selection process, I typically ask them, what does a victim look like? How does she act? If she looks you in the eyes, well, she's not emotional enough. If she looks down, she's disinterested in her own case. If she cries, is she crying too much? What if she doesn't cry enough? Have you ever thought about that? I'm guessing you haven't. Most people have never sat and thought about these things before they got their jury summons. But here you are, and I always describe it as basically a job interview for a job you really don't want. But here you are in this jury room, or in this jury box, trying to decide if we're going to pick you to be on this jury. So you're going to be asked to go back with 11 other people here in a few minutes, or a few days, or a few hours, and decide the credibility of another human being who's going to tell you what they endured. And you'll decide their credibility. I guess my question is, how do you do that? Have you ever considered that? So my point to answer your question is to make people think, stop and think for just a minute before you're quick to judge. The golden rule things are, you have to put yourself in their shoes and all that kind of stuff. You can't do it. It's unethical. It's not something we can ask. But just simply ask them, have you thought about the process you're about to walk through? You're going to listen to a person you've never met describe a thing that you would rather not hear. Then you're going to go back with 11 strangers and decide if that person's telling the truth to the point that I have convinced you all beyond a reasonable doubt that that guy did it. Stop for a second before you say you can be on this jury and think about what that means. That's about the best we can do.
I see another question over there. Put your hand back up, wave it around. There you go.
You may have mentioned this, but I don't know. When did he die? How long ago? And what was his age? Like, was he much older when this all happened, or around the same age?
I asked the same question today, how old he was. How old was he when it happened to me? Do you remember, Kendrick?
I don't. I want to say he was in his
You're muted, Mark.
30s. Oh, sorry.
Oh, now you're good.
No, I'm not muted. I want to say he was in his late 20s, 30s, but I can't remember for sure.
He was born in 62 and this happened in 93. I won't do the math off the top of my head and embarrass myself, but that's how old he was. He died in 2016.
He was 29. He was 29 and I was 19.
He was 54 when he died.
My question is for options. Can you please let us know, like, who are the not who are the advocates, but how do you become an advocate? Like, is there qualifications?
This is a hard question to answer, right? Typically when we're looking for people who are advocates, we're looking for people who are extremely empathetic, people who are understanding, people who are patient, and people who are kind, right? We're looking for people who can speak to somebody level-headedly with kindness. We're not asking someone to be stoic the entire time when they're communicating with survivors. We're just asking and looking for people who can help guide someone through the worst day, the worst time of their life. There are no hard set qualifications, I would say, in terms of education or background even. We look for lived experiences sometimes too. So it's really just comprehensive of how you treat people and conduct yourself in the world. Yeah.
My question is, why are some people nowadays, and this is coming from a 12-year-old, why are some people nowadays, be quiet, Addie, why are some people nowadays blaming the victim in sexual assault cases instead of the predator?
We have a whole industry built around that question.
So I grabbed the mic to respond just because it was closest to me, but I'll probably hand this down. It's a societal thing. We kind of touched on this a little bit, right? It's easier to blame a victim, right? Perpetrators can be somebody that we know. They can be somebody that we're close to, and when we blame the victim, we're saying, oh, you didn't do that right. That would never happen to me because I would do this right, right? So we're looking to set ourselves apart from somebody who is a victim or survivor of this type of crime. And again, perpetrators can look like anyone. Sometimes they're people we know, sometimes they're our friends, sometimes they're our family members. And it can be really difficult to have associated with somebody who's committed that kind of crime too. So.
I think there's a lot of media around that. I look at any rom-com. Look at how often, as part of the story, she doesn't want him and tells him so, but the romantic part is that he ignores her and gives it to her anyway. That certainly sends wrong messages. I think that, we can hear those things in music, and we see those things happen in lots of places. There are lots and lots of reasons. Who else has some thoughts?
I think one of the things that I've seen encountered on this front is I think there's some level that humanity doesn't want to acknowledge that kind of evil exists in someone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think juries, knowing that they're supposed to come to this conclusion by a standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, want to err on the side of caution because they don't want to wrongfully label their fellow man a rapist or a sexual predator. And I think that's a lot of the reservation, is they, unfortunately, almost all sex crimes are two-player incidents, and there's no witnesses. I mean, yeah, you'll have circumstantial evidence and testimony, but I think when faced with, do we believe the victim or do we believe the offender, I think because the state bears that burden of proof of beyond a reasonable doubt, people are nervous to wrongfully label someone a rapist. And so when in doubt, they're going to fall in favor of the defendant. And unfortunately, a lot of that is how our system is structured to protect the accused. But that's my thought on some of why that happens, is they're so afraid to acknowledge that a human being could do this to another human being.
I don't have a lot more. I think it's fear. People are afraid that if that could happen to someone else without them having done anything wrong, then it could happen to you. And that's a lot to accept. There's got to be something wrong with them. They must have done something to bring this on themselves. Otherwise, it could happen to any of us. And that's a lot to take in. That's a scary proposition to absorb. So I will say, too, I don't exactly an answer to your question, but it's prompted by something someone else said. About 10 years after the Belt verdict, I was speaking at a deal in Wichita, and I saw a lady in the back of the room. We made eye contact, and I went, oh, she was the foreperson of the jury. And when I was done speaking, everybody was kind of dispersing, kind of like we did here before the intermission, and she walked up to me. She was smiling, and she shook out her hand, and she goes, "You son of a bitch." I went, "Good to see you." And we kind of laughed, and then she said, "I was in therapy for a year after that trial." I think what we expect of jurors, what we expect people to process and listen to and make intelligent decisions about when faced with this, whether it's this brutality or anything, it's a lot. And thank you for your service. Here's your $15, and see you next year. It's a tough thing. And so there's also just, tonight has been a lot, yeah? And you knew what you were getting in for. You made a choice to come down here and listen to this when you knew I-70 Rapist was on the thing, and it's still a lot. Get a jury summons. You're sitting there, make it be a one-day DUI. Please, please get me out of here. And next thing you know, you're on a rape or a murder charge that you're going to be there for a week. It's a lot.
And I think I mentioned that I was foreman of a jury trial in Trego County several years ago. When that came back to the jury, we had to follow the law. So it said a crime against a mother versus a crime against another. We knew as a jury that the mother was just as guilty. She knew what she had done, but because that isn't how the law read, he was the one that went to prison, even though she was involved in it. So that's the other thing. When you're on the jury, you have to listen, you have to pay attention, you have to take it as if it's your full-time job at that point. And thankfully, the jurors in Belt's case listened, and the prosecutors had all of our evidence to make that case stronger. I think, as they mentioned tonight, if it's happened to you, if it's happened to someone you know, the reporting of it, or as you move forward, that reporting can make a difference, so that if I would not have reported what could have happened with Belt, how many more people would that have happened to? It wasn't easy, but as Kendrick told me today on the phone, and as your question, Morgan, who do you blame? At that time, there was no Google, there was no books, there was nothing that I could get my hands on. And even law enforcement at the time, even the Colby Hospital, in 1993, a rape case of this type was not a norm. So trying to get that to help me think I had not lost it and that I hadn't asked for it, even though mentally I knew that I didn't. And it was, okay, God, why me? Why am I going through this? 33 years later, 31 years later, 32, do I know now why? Yeah, he had a plan for it. And Kendrick, what'd you tell me today? It was all on Belt.
It was all on Belt. It was not on you.
So with the programs at HaysMed and the options program, do you see any colleges or hospitals kind of going with this kind of programs to support females?
I mean, I can speak to local colleges. I mean, just by having an advocate regularly on their campus, so myself, I'm regularly on Fort Hays campus, I think that helps support survivors. The Title IX program here at Fort Hays is really great. They help walk people through those cases, and Title IX does more than just sexual assault, sexual harassment, but you know, they're quick to involve professionals and bring in advocacy, and I think that the institution as a whole is really supportive of the programs that we do offer and getting students in touch with an advocate. And I can say the same thing for Colby Community College now, too. We're very well connected out there. And yeah, anytime that there's a situation that's reported to a counselor, they contact me, and we're out there and we can meet with the student directly, or you know, over the phone or through email or all those processes. So I would say that the institutions, at least in Northwest Kansas, have been very good with their college students and inviting these programs in.
I think the other thing, Aaron Cunningham went to the VOTEC here, Fort Hays VOTEC campus last fall. Cooper is back in school, and he said, oh, by the way, I met Aaron Cunningham today. You don't really want your college kid coming home saying he met the county attorney. Okay, so he went up to Aaron afterwards and said, yeah, I'll be there. And Aaron's like, oh, okay. And this was back in August, September. I mean, it was way back last fall. And Aaron's like, okay, that's great. And Cooper goes, that's my mom. And Aaron's like, oh, you know. So all the way back last fall, they were already going to campus. And, you know, there were professors here on the main campus and on the VOTEC campus that were encouraging students come. Some maybe are even getting extra credit to be here. So those are things that help engage students to listen and learn and understand. And it's kudos to the agencies and the staff going to where the people are versus waiting for victims and survivors to come to them.
I would say, I can't see everybody out there, but earlier at the break we lost a few folks, but there were a few young men in here, and that's important. I mean, a room full of women talking about this is great. It is important, but the young men need to change their damn behavior. We need to get that across. And the movies I watched in the late 70s and the 80s growing up took a very flippant attitude about this sort of thing. There were things that were in movies that were mainstream that today couldn't get made and shouldn't have gotten made back then, that normalized this sort of behavior. Not what we talked about tonight. I don't think any era has ever normalized what Doug Belt was like, but normalized dating violence and dating, you know. Anyway, we need to, as a society, continue to have events like this to remind some of our young men how they're supposed to behave. I will say I've seen an improvement in certain areas. So it's not what it was 40 years ago.
All right, I think we have time for one more question, and I see a big hand right over there. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
As for options, do you also have male advocates that are available? Just because that's...
We do. We do have one male on staff who will meet with individuals. We are predominantly a female-led staff, but we do have a male advocate too that can meet with men too.
It's probably the fewest we've had. Usually we have 2 or 3.
At HaysMed, we also have one forensic nurse examiner that is a male as well. And we've found that no matter what gender the patient is, they're very comfortable with him. And so I think gender can maybe be a factor in a patient wanting to continue with an exam or continue with advocacy, but we always make sure that we ensure the patient's comfortable with whoever is the examiner before that we would proceed with anything. So.
I don't really have a question, but I feel the need to kind of rephrase this for every victim or survivor that is here. Stacy kind of said, God's plan, but I choose to believe that it was not God's plan. There's evil in this world, and it was the evil's plan. It was his plan to do it. God's plan was to walk with each and every survivor, victim through that. He didn't choose for this to happen to the victims, survivors. He chooses to make us be successful and walk through it.
Okay, my question is kind of a different question. Tonight it's all been the word rape. Say a younger child or something is fondled, etc., not necessarily sexually penetrated. Where is the line there?
So we have a whole host of laws that have to do with children under certain ages, and there's things called, indecent liberties. Does not require sexual penetration, but it has to do with sexual touching, fondling, things like that. Things that are done for the sexual gratification of the person doing the touching. So a parent giving a bath to a toddler will probably touch them in all sorts of places as they're just washing them. There's no sexual gratification. There's no every crime to be a crime has to have two components, the act and the mental state. So if my hand goes over the buttocks of a 1-year-old as I'm washing the child in the bath, there's nothing sexual about that. That's not a crime. Somebody who's doing that for sexual gratification, context is everything, when and why and under what circumstances they're doing these things, that would be a crime of sexual touching. And in Kansas, we call that crime indecent liberties. If there's more force involved, or if the child's of a certain age, then it could be aggravated indecent liberties. There's literally a whole host of separate crimes that go to the different types of solicitation. Asking a child for sex is different than a touching crime. So we have sexual battery, indecent liberties, solicitation. I mean, there's a whole host of statutes on the books to address all these sorts of things. And then we had, since 2006, when the legislature passed Jessica's law, now we're talking about sexual penetration of a child under 13, and that's going to be what's called an off-grid offense. There's tremendous penalties for that.
And there's a misconception, too, of what penetration means. And that's part of what, as a sexual assault nurse examiner, if we are testifying in court, we can help define that for the jurors so that they understand that, so I'm going to just say the body part, right? Penetration doesn't mean that something has to go inside the vagina, okay? And so it can be the areas surrounding that can still mean penetration. And so that's where the attorney can ask the sexual assault nurse examiner on the stand to help explain that and clarify what the definition of those genitals and where that line starts.
So any penetration, however slight, of the female sexual organ. That's literally the quote phrase from the law. Labia doesn't have to be the vaginal vault, can be the labia. Any penetration, however slight, of the female sexual organ is penetration under Kansas law.
And I know that we're talking about adult sexual assault here, but you did bring up an important point involving children. So the difference there, as far as interviews, instead of a detective necessarily being the one that does the interview, we have the Western Kansas Child Advocacy Center in our community, and actually they support a lot of Western Kansas. They will interview the children. They have a office here down by the post office, and they also have a mobile bus that they can bring out to different locations. So I met the sheriff from Decatur County, where I'm from. They'll take the bus out there and they'll interview a child in those circumstances. I have been trained, Colleen was trained, there's probably others who've been trained, so in certain situations, I'll interview a child, just depending on the situation, but oftentimes we'll schedule that with the Child Advocacy Center, and they'll do the interview of the child up to a certain age, or juveniles, for us. And then they can still go and see get a SANE exam at the hospital. The Child Advocacy Center also has their own SANE nurses that sometimes they'll do depending on the situation. So.
Any final questions? Okay. Thank you to our panelists, Mark, Aniston, Stacy especially, and Stacy. The courage you showed tonight is going to ripple out of this community and continue to ripple and ripple further than I think you'll probably ever know. You walked into this room and you gave something very, very precious to every single person in here. You took the worst night of your life and you turned it into a light for other people. And that is not a small thing. That is everything. And we are honored by you. Thank you. I want to take a minute and acknowledge everybody in this room who came out carrying their own story. Some of you know exactly what Stacy described because you may have lived something like it. You may have come here wondering if it was safe to be in this space, wondering if you would be okay. And I hope that tonight you were seen. I hope that you felt believed. And I hope you know, above all else, that you are not alone. You are never alone. The work of ending sexual violence is not finished yet, unfortunately, probably not in our lifetimes. But every time a community gathers like ours did tonight, when people walk in this room, something shifts, something changes, silence gets a little bit smaller. Shame loses just a little bit of its grip on us, and survivors, past, present, and future, gain a little bit more ground. And I want to leave you with a charge. What you heard tonight is not an isolated story. Sexual violence affects 1 in 6 women and 1 in 33 men in this country. In community after community after community, survivors suffer alone because they are not believed. They fear they will not be believed. And one of the most powerful things that any of us can do today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, the rest of your lives is simply this: believe them. Believe survivors. When someone trusts you enough to tell you the worst thing that ever happened to them, believe them. Don't ask what they were wearing. Don't ask if they were being sassy. Don't ask why they didn't report sooner. Don't look for a reason not to believe them, for it not to be true. Just believe them. Your belief is not a small thing, and for many survivors, that is the very, very first step to healing, and for some people, that's absolutely everything. If tonight stirred something in you, I hope you'll act on it. I hope that you talk about what you heard. I hope that you share the resources that you pick up from the tables in the back. Check on the people in your lives who might need somebody to lean on. And if you're moved to support this work in a tangible way, Options is always grateful, whether that's a donation, whether that's volunteering your time, or simply spreading the word, or holding silence, holding witness with someone who is disclosed to you. If you or somebody that you know needs us, we are here all the time, around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No questions required, no judgment, just support. Our toll-free number, I used to rattle it off and nobody's going to remember it, but it is written down for you so you don't have to remember it at our table back there. I want to end by saying that tonight mattered. You mattered. You being here mattered, and the ripple from this room, from Stacy's story, from the conversations tonight on our panel, your willingness to show up will go further than any of us can see from where we're standing right now. So before you leave, I'm going to give you 3 things that you can do to support a survivor of sexual assault. The first thing is believe them. The second thing is believe them. Guess what the third thing is? I can't hear you. Yeah, there you go. All right, maybe we'll throw in a fourth one and say also call options. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for coming this evening, Stacy. Thank you for your gift. Thank you. And we're going to close our evening this evening with a prayer from Bishop Vinke, so I'd like to invite him up. Oh, there you are.
Thanks so much. God bless you. You did a great job. Please stand. Wow, what a night. Loving God, we thank you so much for this night, this opportunity to learn so much about this situation. And we're just grateful for this opportunity that was provided for us. Lord, we thank you as well for the law enforcement, everybody that works in law enforcement. We thank you that for their great work of service to us. We ask that you protect all the law enforcement people. Please protect them from any evil. We thank you, Lord, for all those who are advocates for sexual abuse victims and all that they do, counselors, psychologists, advocates that really, nurses and doctors who care for them, just everybody that really has a great concern for them. Just thank you, Lord, for choosing them and being really a great witness of hope to the people who are hurt. We pray for special blessings upon all of them, that they continue to be a light to those who are hurting. And most of all, Lord, we pray for Stacy, and we thank you, Lord, for her, giving her the courage and strength and being with her in the midst of all these years of this deep wound in her heart. And Lord, we pray that she continue to experience deeper healing. And we thank you, Lord, for all her friends and family who support her, and everyone here tonight. Please just may, like Jennifer said, may our hearts really just be open to change and really do what's best for those who are hurting from abuse especially. Please bless everyone here and safe travels. And thank you for being here. May God bless all of you, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. You did a great job.
Oh, thank you.
No, really, I
Thank
learned
you.
so much.
Oh, good.
And I have to admit, I've made some mistakes. I've made some mistakes dealing with issues.
Me too.
I'm aching a little bit.
You know, I had an aha moment.